Welcome back to Indiana Sports Beat, of course, coming to you from the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios. Jim Coyle with you as always, and this is happy as we could be right now to be joined by Indiana Hall of Famer and former basketball player Bryan Evans. Bryan, thank you so much for joining us, man.
Well, happy to join you guys. This will be fun.
Looking forward. I've been wanting to talk to you for a long time. You're one of those players that, Todd Leary's on the show each Friday, and we talk about recruiting a lot, and he's always laughing at those quote unquote recruiting experts, and your recruiting was kind of a perfect example of why he does that, because all these guys are ranked 5-star and this star, and you weren't really recruited heavily, but you end up being a Big Ten Player of the Year, IU Hall of Famer, played in the NBA. It's funny how these experts have things pegged so well right now, but it's not always the case.
No, you're right. I do think they've gotten better through the years. I mean, it's a real business for sure. But there's certain things they can't measure. I think that top tier guys, the 5-star guys, I mean, you're almost guaranteed a really good player. But some of those guys are going to lack heart and intensity and commitment. I mean, they're not all home runs, right? I mean, just because they're 5-star guys, they're basically at that age, they're 5-star ability. And then you get guys that, I would probably throw myself in that category. That I'd have given my right arm to play for Bob Knight at Indiana. And so when I got an opportunity to be there, I worked as hard as I could, and I listened the best that I could, and I gave everything I had to it. And I had a great coach that was, pushing me and driving me every day and not giving me days off. So it was kind of like a perfect storm. But I think I'm with Todd when it comes to, they overdo it now, and because it's become a business, it's just that, right? It's a big business.
Yeah, and you look back at the guys that you played with at Indiana, coming out of high school, I don't know how many of those guys would have been listed as 5-stars, but I know there was a whole bunch of guys that made it to the NBA on that team and were unbelievable players, which is, again, funny because, there was, 8 guys off of that era that came right before you, right after you, that probably played in the NBA?
Yeah, several guys for sure, and it was one of those things. I think Coach had won at such a high level that we were all watching the Steve Alford, 87 team, and recruiting for Coach in the state of Indiana was fish in a barrel at that time, and if he wanted you wanted him back, and you wanted to play here. So I mean. But still, we had a pretty cool culture where, guys like me, I came in there and certainly wasn't I don't even know if I would have been a 2-star recruit, to be honest. But, I know I didn't score 1,000 points in high school, and think about Damon scored 3,000 points. I didn't score 1,000. And, but at the same time, I went to practice and I played against Calvert Chaney, and Alan Henderson, we're in the same class, but it was invaluable stuff, to go and have to lace them up every day and know that you're gonna be guarding and get guarded by, the College Player of the Year. So all of those things, and Bob Knight calling the shots really helped somebody like me improve the way that I did.
And you talk about the guys you played against, and I mentioned a minute ago how many guys were on that team that just turned out to be unbelievably exceptional. Todd Leary, Calvert Chaney, Damon Bailey, Pat Graham, Eric Anderson. But I don't know if he may have been before you. I can't remember, but there was crossover there. But so many guys, Nover, that had to make some battles in practice. I mean, just wars, which had to make you guys incredibly good from that standpoint alone.
Yeah, that's a lot of great players, and a lot of those guys, Eric included. He was a senior my redshirt freshman year, so I did get to play with him, and the practices they were super competitive, and coaches, though he set it up so practice was more challenging and more difficult than the game, and that's easy to say that and I coached my daughter's fourth grade team this past winter, and I can promise you that the practices were not as difficult as the games. So it's easy to say that you're going to do that, but Coach Knight really did create that environment. So it was intense, and when I got there, that's the only way I knew. I didn't know it was any different. So we had some really good teams those first few years, and as we tapered off a little bit, maybe my last 2 years, and didn't have the same type of success, and I saw then the practices changed. But man, it was intense, and if you were going to beat somebody out and win a spot, you were beating out a pro basketball player to get some playing time.
And how much does that go into making the team great? I mean, you guys, you were on, no doubt, to me, arguably the best team to not win a national championship. Is incredible. Just some bad luck happened at the wrong time. But man, oh man, I just think back to those teams were unbelievably good. But we talk about these battles in practice. How far did that go to making you guys as good as you were?
Well, again, I'll start off by saying when I got, that's all I knew. I just remember thinking, man, this is no joke. I can't believe how difficult practice is. I was exhausted, and Coach was on us. He never let up, and that's I love him for that. Looking back on how he never took a day off, and so he was pushing us, and it was really competitive, and we didn't. I still think about like those Michigan teams with the Fab Five, and a couple of the Ohio State teams with Jimmy Jackson, and we still weren't the most talented team. I mean, we had a lot of guys that played pro basketball, but we didn't have that. We didn't have NBA All-Star talent. But we found a way to play together, and we were a good team. I mean, we were the best team in the conference, but we weren't shoo-ins to play in the NBA by any means.
Yeah, I remember those Fab Five era. Those guys didn't win the Big Ten. Indiana did. Your Indiana teams won the Big Ten against those guys.
That's right. I think I'm very proud of that. I watched that 30 for 30 on the Fab Five, and I'm screaming from the mountaintop. Unfortunately, only my wife and kids can hear me screaming in the living room when I'm trying to tell everybody that Michigan never won a Big Ten title. Nobody's listening.
There's a lot of Hoosier Nation that was listening, I promise you. They were probably shouting the same thing. That's probably why they couldn't hear you, because they're all yelling the same thing. But that in and of itself is a testament to team basketball and how important it is to have a team more than it is to have superstars. Because you look at today, the five these one and dones.
No, you're right. No, you're right. And can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, you can hear me. Okay. I think it starts with, so you got a lot of talent. Who is that top guy on your team? Who is the best player that you have? Because that matters. And our best player was Calvert Chaney, and Calvert Chaney was as good of a leader. I mean, he was a quiet leader. He didn't have a lot to say, but he was an unselfish guy. And he cared more about the team. Calvert, as great as he was, and he ran away with the Player of the Year, the Wooden Award, obviously the Big Ten Player of the Year. And he knew that those awards would take care of themselves if his team won, and he really did. It's easy to say that, but that's really the way he played, and he personified that every single day. Where our best player cared more about our team than he did himself. And that's a huge deal. So who's your best player? And if that guy is thinking it all about himself and thinking all about his NBA potential, that can hurt a team. And we didn't have that, because if Calvert had a guy, he caught the ball in the wing and he had somebody recovering to him, and he saw me in the corner, even though I was a freshman, and he thought I could make that shot, I got the ball. He delivered the ball to the next guy, and he trusted his teammates, and it's underappreciated for sure. And so we had guys like that. I mean, when your best player, makes me think of the San Antonio Spurs and Tim Duncan, who I love. I was a teammate of his on a USA team, and he was much like Calvert, where he's the best player out there. There's no question. Nobody could question that. But he's the best teammate out there as well. And when you have that, you win, and you win big.
Is that part of what makes them the best players? Because not only are they athletically and talented in what they do, but mentally being able to look for the win, not so much the accolades.
Well, I sure think so. I mean, I was around a couple really good ones, and Calvert was at the top of the list. Tim Duncan was right there. Where I played on a USA team going into my senior year at IU, and it was Tim, and it was Ray Allen and Allen Iverson, and it was a really good team. And the best player was Tim, and he didn't care if he came off the bench or played 15 minutes. He dominated the game, but he was a team guy. And Calvert was like that. I mean, Calvert ran away with the Player of the Year awards that year. And, if you saw us on a road trip or you saw us having dinner, I mean, there was nothing showy about that guy. He was one of the 12 guys on the team. And I think when you have a leader like that, it's a big deal.
I had another teammate of yours on not too long ago. Greg Graham was on with us. And one of the things that he talked about was the lack of an IU presence on the current staff. It's not a knock on the staff, but just an observation. But there was just not an IU presence there, really. Derek Elston's on there, but he's not really part of the immediate assistant coach's staff. And he thinks that really hurts the program. What do you think that's going to take for Indiana? Because they're not, right now, today, Indiana is not the Indiana of old. What's it going to take for them to get back to those, at least that type of era?
That's a tough question. I was an IU basketball fan my whole life, and somehow got invited to go play there at the 11th hour. And, had a great experience, and it's a funny deal because I go straight back to being a fan, right? And I've stayed a fan for the last 22 years since I've been gone, and I don't have all the answers, and I love the program, and I think it's because I'm so much of a diehard fan that I root for Archie. I mean, I know he's younger than me, right? But I look at him and I'm rooting so hard for those guys, and I just hope they're doing the right things. I don't know if the answer is they need an IU guy on staff. I don't know what that means. I understand that Greg would feel that way. I just don't know. I love the program. I like to see him get it back to where we win, consistently year in and year out. And because I don't live that life, and I'm not on that staff, and I'm not in college basketball, I can't even say that I know what it takes to do that. I know it's a tough job. I mean, and that's why we pay those guys so much money. That ain't easy, and they're up against it big time. And so, our program had fallen off a lot in the last several years, and trying to rebuild that, I know it's a tough job.
Absolutely. And one of the things that really rings true, though, you talk about being a fan, and whether it's Greg, Graham, or Todd, you can tell that comes through. They're not just former players. They're actually fans still to this day of the program. And I wonder, is that still there with some of these high school kids right now?
I don't know. That's another, hey, you pose great questions. I don't know the answer to that one. I think so much has changed. The kids have changed. I think about the Virginia team this year, who I just enjoyed watching play, and I love the way that the brand of basketball, and those guys really, to me, seem like they played for one another, and they played for the name on the front of the jersey versus the back. And I'm a sucker for that stuff, right? And I think the casual, the typical Indiana fan would agree with me. That's what we love, right? And I don't know that's what we had last year. I don't know that that's what we were watching, but I loved watching that team. Yet they go win a title, and there's probably one solid pro prospect on that team. DeAndre Hunter is probably the solid pro prospect who's a lottery pick. And 20 years ago when I played, if you weren't a lottery pick, you'd come back to school to try to boost that your draft status. And nowadays it's totally different. Everybody leaves. James Blackman leaves. He's not going to be drafted, but he leaves. I don't understand that. I still don't understand. Why would you leave Bloomington, it's the greatest place. It's the greatest school. I had so much fun when I was there. I don't understand. If I'd had a sixth year, I'd have gone back again. I just don't understand where these guys think they're going. You know, you're in a race to the D-League. You're in a race to play in the third division in Sweden. I mean, where are you going? There's nothing better than Bloomington, Indiana, and playing in Assembly Hall in front of those fans. I have a hard time understanding what's going on in college, to be real honest with you. You know, guys, and I really love Kyle Guy. I love the way he plays. I know his family. My daughters play volleyball with his sister, and the game has changed. You know, he's pressured to go. I mean, he's being told, the agents and everyone just pushing him out of there. I think he loved his experience there. Everything has changed when it comes to that. And you have to be, everyone believes they got to be their own corporation and their own business and build their own brand. You know, when I hear these NBA guys talking about their brand, I still think about Coach Knight. Like if you would have said that you were trying to build your brand, I mean, are you kidding me? You'd have been done in you'd have never suited up again. You know, it wasn't about us. It was about the program. It was about our team, and it was about our teammates. And so all of that's changed, and that's no fun.
And you mentioned Kyle Guy and how much you enjoyed watching Virginia. Man, that's one that certainly got away, not just from Indiana, but from a lot of schools here, but specifically from Indiana. That's one that they missed on.
And you know what? The listeners may not like this, but I've got super juicy details regarding that I cannot share, unfortunately, and really disappointing, because he's a guy that we should have had. No pun intended.
Well, feel free to share them with me off air. I won't share them.
His folks and his grandfather are huge Indiana fans, and it's just a shame that he didn't play in Assembly Hall and wear pinstripes. I mean, it's a shame.
It really is. I mean, again, because I say that's another one that got away, and I go back to having all these IU kids, and another thing, back when you guys were playing, the amount of kids on the roster that were from Indiana, and if they weren't from Indiana, they were from Champaign or just around Illinois or close by. It was crazy.
There you go. Let me throw this one at you. So 1991-92, my first year that I redshirted, we had 13 guys from Indiana and three guys from Illinois, and they were Eric Anderson, Chris Reynolds from Peoria, and Jamal Meeks from, outside of Chicago. So we had two Chicago guys and a Peoria guy, and everybody else was Indiana. By the time I left 5 years later, it was me and maybe one other Indiana kid, maybe two, and everybody else was Florida, Louisiana, Texas, California, and I was the captain of these teams, and we had guys that didn't know that we hated Purdue. They didn't know that we hated Kentucky. They didn't understand anything what was going on, and it was tough, to lead teams like that. Like, nobody had to tell me Calvert didn't have to tell me, or Eric Anderson didn't have to tell me that I was supposed to hate Purdue. I already knew. So it was so much different by the time I left there. So that whole transition, it still happened. It happened under Coach Knight's watch. I mean, the roster really turned over, and it was a lot of out-of-state kids.
What led to that monumental shift, do you think?
I don't know. I don't know. I mean, it could have been a shortage of talent in the state. I really don't know. All I know is we were getting All-Americans. Keep in mind, these guys were, Neil Reed was a McDonald's All-American out of Louisiana, even though he had lived in Indiana. Andre Patterson, Texas, McDonald's All-American. Charlie Miller was a, kind of right there, McDonald's All-American-ish player out of Miami. And this was a very high-ranked recruiting class that came in. So it's not like he wasn't getting players. He was choosing guys. That was a big time recruiting class that came in, but they weren't Indiana guys, and they struggled. I mean, they struggled, and it was tough to lead them. I mean, we had guys that didn't understand. They didn't understand what it was going to be like to play for him, and that was my job, is to get them in the preseason to understand how difficult it was going to be, and prep them for what a season is going to be like. And we were okay. I mean, these are tournament teams, by the way. I'm talking about it like we were epic failures. We weren't. By our standards now, we were a really good team. We finished tied for second in the Big Ten, and made the NCAA tournament. We'd have killed for that season this year, right? I mean, killed for it.
Absolutely, and it's funny you mentioned that shift, that paradigm of shifting players, because about that time also for the rest of Coach Knight's career at Indiana, he never got past the second round in the NCAA tournament.
Right. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what the recruiting. I think if you asked Coach, I don't think he liked his staff at that point in time. I don't think his staff was necessarily getting it done. I don't think he was going out and maybe recruiting quite as hard as he used to. I don't know the answer to that. That's a guess. But again, he was pulling in guys that you still get Dane Fife. I mean, those are Luke Recker. Those are McDonald's All-Americans. It's not like those were bad recruiting classes. Jason Collier, McDonald's All-American.
Jared Jeffries.
And when you get those guys, I think this ties us back up to the very first question you asked me. When you get those guys, it does not mean you're going to win titles. It's, there's still a lot of other parts that go into it. How bad do you want it? How tough are you? And certainly playing for Coach Knight, how tough are you? That's a big deal. That's a big question. And if you don't have the kind of toughness or heart to play for him, it doesn't matter how good you are.
And everything you've talked about kind of leads me in the early part of your NBA career. You were with Orlando. You were the first round pick for the Magic, and you were on the same team with Penny Hardaway, right?
Yeah.
He's having. You talk about recruiting of Fab Five type of year. He's having that right now at Memphis. It's unbelievable what he's bringing in there right now. Doesn't mean that there's going to be winning, but that's a hell of a recruiting class that he's got there.
Yeah, I don't follow it too super closely. I mean, I think I read an article, the other day that his class is catapulted to number one, and he's a likable guy. I think the key for him is there's so much right now. Like, he's coming from that AAU world, and he was coaching a lot of these kids, and he still had a lot of bling on his game, right? I mean, he was when I got there to Orlando, I mean, he was a big star. He was those Chris Rock commercials. I mean, Little Penny was a big deal, and a lot of people remember that. But his closeness to the AAU program, I think, has really helped him. He's known these kids. He's coached a bunch of them. Anybody from Tennessee, bordering states. He was coaching a AAU team that all these guys went and played for. So he had a leg up there. And then you get a little bit of momentum, right? He gets two or three guys, and the next two or three are trying to create that super team. And because all these young guys, they see what goes on in the NBA. When they watch Durant go and join the Warriors, they see that stuff, right? And so I think they go, we're all going there. Let's all go play at Memphis. And Penny will do a good job. But you know what? Let's give it 2 years and look back and let's see what they do. Because these are also kids that now you got to do it every year. I mean, ask Calipari, ask Krzyzewski. You got to when you go that route and recruit that type of kid, you got to get the next group of them too, because these guys are going to be gone.
Absolutely.
I mean, we got James Blackman leaving early. We've got guys that are leaving early that are not getting drafted. So the ones that are these 5-star blue chips, they're gone. They're going to be there for, it's going to be a Romeo experience.
Yeah, and I don't know if it's the people around them or if their heads are getting filled with things that are not really in their best interest, but you see it happen a lot, and they end up kind of paying the price sometimes.
Well, I mean, the bottom line is, and I don't know where all these guys get advice, but there's not a lot of open spots, right? That's a big boy league. They're pros, and you join a roster. If you're a first round pick, you get a 2-year deal with a team option for the third year. Anybody that's not being drafted in that first round, they're not on that team, and there's a bunch of dogs that are fighting for those spots. And so I think these guys come in kind of soft, and they don't understand how much it is a man's league.
They think they're going to just waltz in there, but how many retirement press conferences do you see every year? Very few.
Yeah.
No one retires. You kind of get run out of that league.
You just go away.
Rosters run out of spots. There's very few people have that retirement press conference. Even the best players are still trying to get squeeze another year out. But you got all these young guys every year that are coming in and they're going pro. I mean, we had a guy in our, I don't want to name any names, but we've got guys that average 5 points a game that are going to, send out feelers for the NBA. I mean, that's how far out of whack this thing has become. You've got non-starters at a program that didn't make the tournament that want to gauge their potential to go into the draft. I mean, if that system's not broken, I don't know what is.
Does that also say that their head's not where it should be, especially when you're a team that didn't succeed, like you mentioned, and that obviously they were a part of that? Is their head not where it needs to be on being better where they are right now?
Oh, I think so. 100%. I don't know if these guys just dream about playing in that league so much that they're blinded by that. I don't know, because it makes no sense. You're not leading your team to victories. You're averaging 7 or 8 points a game. You don't start, and you think that, so it's an ego thing, right? Because then you get to make that announcement. Because all you have to have is a Twitter account to say that I'm going to make your announcement. I'm going to go and, put my name in for the NBA draft. I'm going to put my name in. And I just can't believe how different this is. Because if anybody had done that playing for the guy that I played for, he'd come to your apartment and pack your bag for you. You would never play there again, which is funny. I mean, it's the way. So I know that there's a lot of old school in me because I love him and I believe in the way he approached it. And I really, when you're playing for a university and they're giving you an education, it wasn't about getting paid. And now that, that's the hot topic is these guys deserve money. Nobody gave us anything. In fact, he used to go visit professors from time to time and make certain that they weren't giving us a break. But in fact, he'd go to my professor and say, give him a hard time. I give Bryan a hard time every day. Give him a hard time. He likes it. And it's so much different than what these guys are going through. They're just, and so, time it's 20 years ago, but it seems like a million.
Yeah, and you've got all the stuff that went on with the FBI investigation, with the shoe companies paying all these people. And a thing that I found troubling is yesterday you had Trendon Watford committing to LSU, which is obviously coached by a coach that was caught on wiretaps, saying things that probably not kosher to what's going on in the NCAA today.
I didn't catch that, and I've been kind of tracking that kid. I met him when he was just a little guy. 10 years ago. I didn't know that he had committed today. That bums me out that he didn't come to Bloomington. Sounds like he's a good player. I saw his list of who he was considering, and I thought, well, how in the world can you go to LSU right now? But that just speaks. That tells a story. I have no idea what's going on. Everything has changed. It makes no sense. Nobody would have gone to LSU 20 years ago after all of that took place. That would be the last place you'd go. You'd take him off your list immediately. Yet, there he goes. So the landscape has changed, and I sound like an old dinosaur.
No, actually, I think a lot of people share your opinion. I do, and I think there's plenty of people that do. There are people that obviously don't, unfortunately, and that's a sad indictment on society, I think, and maybe the game, but just probably society in general.
Well, I still tune in and watch it. I love it. I love that you're playing for a university, and it's sad that some of these guys that are being fast-tracked to the NBA, you question their desire, you question their heart, how bad because they're being forced to go to school. They wanted to go to the NBA, but the rules said they couldn't do it. Man, we're rooting for them like crazy, and it's like we want them to want it more than they want it, and that kind of sucks. But at the end of the day, when it's March Madness time, I'm not missing a minute I'm watching it. I love it. This tournament, I think this past tournament might be the best one I've ever seen.
Yeah, I
so
agree.
Even though we have all these guys that are trying to defect to the NBA, and whether they should or not, at the end of the day, it's still a great brand of basketball. I love watching it.
Man, I could go on with you all day. You've been one of my favorite interviews, to be honest. This has been great. I could just shut up and let you talk all day, which I'm sure most people would appreciate anyway. But I'd love to be able to talk about your wife as a former volleyball player at Indiana. I'd love to talk to you about that in the future. There's such a connection between the IU basketball program and the volleyball program. It's kind of weird.
Oh, with like Benson and
just all kinds. Yeah, all kinds of connections. Just a great one at that. But look forward to that.
Oh, we love it. We go down. Well, we saw you down there. But my wife got a story, not all that dissimilar from mine, where she was a walk-on actually, and her first couple months on campus earned a scholarship and earned it all 4 years. And so I love her story. She dug it out of the ground the hard way, and kind of shares my views on some of these things. And I got 3 daughters and a son, but all the girls are, they're following in their mother's footsteps. They all love volleyball. Nobody's into the hoops. My son, to be determined. He's almost 8. He's more of an ex-boxer than he is a hooper at this point in time, but we'll see.
Bryan, I cannot thank you enough, man. It's been a pleasure to get to talk to you today, and I really, really appreciate it.
Hey, listen, I run my mouth. You call me anytime, man. I'm happy to come on the show. And if you're a friend of Todd's, you're a friend of mine. He was a great teammate back in the day. And, I know that I probably sound like a broken record because he and I probably think a lot alike. Todd's a great dude, and I'm rooting for him. And you just call me anytime, man. You shoot me a text, I'll come on your show.
Bryan, I appreciate it, brother. Thank you so much. Tell the family I said hello, and you guys have a great night.
We'll do it. Have a good one. We'll talk to you.
Thank you. Bryan Evans, Indiana Hall of Famer, former Indiana basketball player. Hey, thanks for listening to the rebroadcast from today's edition of Indiana Sports Beat with Jim Coyle, the only daily show dedicated to Indiana University athletics. You can catch us live each weekday on IndianaSportsBeat.com, TheDailyHoosier.com, GruelingTruth.com, or go to Spreaker.com for live notifications. Yeah, that's speaker with an R, SPREAKER.com. You can also catch the entire show any place you listen to a podcast, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Google Play, etc. You can find and follow the show on Facebook or follow me on Twitter at Jim Coyle ISB for complete coverage of the Indiana Hoosiers. Thanks again. I hope you have a great day. I'm Jim Coyle, and I will see you on the radio.